In order to prevent me from marrying my wife, my brother, who had a covert infatuation on her since school, invited my ex to my wedding, so I accused him of cheating on his pregnant girlfriend. Please be patient as this will be a lengthy read. Jake, whose fictitious name is M25, is my younger brother. I am M27. I believe that Jake and I had a fairly typical sibling connection and were close as brothers. Perhaps I didn't realize what was happening, or perhaps he was really skilled at concealing his actual feelings. My current wife, Zara, F24, and my ex-girlfriend, Ruth, F27, are also included in this narrative. Zara, Jake, and I all attended the same school. I never really engaged with Zara because I was a few years older than them. I was acquainted with Jake and all of his pals, and we occasionally played together, but that was our only connection. Because our interests were so dissimilar, Jake and I began to drift apart by the time I was in my junior year. I kind of expected this kind of stuff to occur. I didn't really try for a tight relationship with him since I believed that was a normal part of growing up. We didn't exchange secrets, but we did occasionally hang around. It also didn't worry me much because boys don't actually do that. The only significant aspect of this narrative is that Jake was hanging out with a few of his buddies and their women, including Zara, just before I left for college. I want to clarify that nothing of the kind occurred before you start calling me a groomer or a weirdo for pursuing a 15-year-old. I got to know every child there, and one of them inquired about my college location. Zara added that it was her ideal institution when I informed them, and I just said that she was more than welcome to ask for my assistance when she applied. That was it. She was the only person I interacted with at school. After that, I left for college and completely forgot about that little encounter, because it didn't matter. I met Ruth in college. We clicked right away when we were classmates. I finally asked her out in my third year of college, although it took some time. We began dating after she said yes. Everything was wonderful in the beginning of the relationship. Because we had comparable struggles and aspirations for our own lives, we were able to relate to one another. I therefore thought I truly understood her. After graduating from college, I was able to secure a lucrative position, but Ruth was not as lucky. We agreed to move in together to save money, and I was more than happy to assist her. She was applying for jobs all over the place, but for some reason she was never hired, even when she reached the interview stage. Even though I made enough money to support the two of us, it was still hard to save much since I was still in the early stages of my work, and I knew this was having a negative psychological impact on her. For more than a year, she continued to apply to various locations without success. She was devastated, and I did my best to be there for her. But shortly after, she realized that we could make ends meet with just my paycheck, so she gave up completely. At first, I assumed she was simply worn out from applying and being turned down, and that it was having a negative psychological impact on her. I thus embraced the shift. She followed my advice to take some time off and engage in enjoyable activities. For 3 or 4 months, this continued. She stopped complaining as much, became happier, experienced less stress, and her mental health significantly improved. I was also pleased for her. In the next weeks, I hoped to gently encourage her to resume her job search. I brought up the subject a month later, but she reacted negatively. She claimed that she started crying at the thought of going through that terrifying experience once more, and she advised me to avoid bringing it up ever again. When she was ready, she added, she would begin applying. I accepted since I believed her and didn't want to put undue pressure on her or come out as unsupportive. I was promoted and given a sizable raise 2 years after I started working. Now that I could at last start saving and doing the things I loved, I was ecstatic. I've had to put a lot of my aspirations on wait for the past 2 years in order to provide for 2 people with my paycheck. Now that I had some money to spend on fun, I felt relaxed. However, Ruth began pleading with me to assist in paying for her niece's schooling as soon as she learned that I had been given a raise. Ruth's brother was impoverished and could only work for a few months at a time. He was unaware that he had gotten a woman pregnant. The child went to Ruth's brother because the wife passed away and had no relatives. Furthermore, he was completely unprepared to care for another person. Ruth pleaded with me, I don't know how, but I love my niece given that they had only met twice and that she would never be able to forgive herself for failing to assist her. All of this was getting to be too much for me, so I told her I would give it some thought and ended the conversation there. There was a part of me that honestly considered giving her the money, but there was also a nastier part of me that believed it was her niece and that she could find a job if any Joe band helped her. That night, I drank a lot, and as I continued to drink, all the logic and reason I had suppressed came flooding back. Since I was in love with Ruth, I never really gave the suspicion that she was trying to take advantage of me any attention. I was unable to get rid of those emotions, though. I was pleased to support her throughout her life, but it seemed excessive to ask me to support her niece as soon as I received a raise, especially at the expense of my own desires. Since I would be stuck in this situation for the rest of my life if I started supporting the niece now, I felt it was time to stand up for myself. I sat Ruth down the next day and informed her that, regardless of how dire the situation, I would not be providing financial support for her niece. I also informed her that she was more than welcome to take a job and support the poor child if she felt sorry for her. I didn't give a damn about what she did with that money, it would be hers. I refused to listen to her attempt to butt in, claiming that I was being unkind and that a poor youngster needed my assistance. I also informed her that the distribution of domestic duties would shift if she failed to find employment. If she wasn't making a financial contribution, I expected her to do 80% of the tasks, because we didn't have any children or pets. I informed her that I wanted a vacation after working tirelessly for the past 2 years to support her while balancing work and home. She needed to assist relieve some of my financial burden if she wasn't prepared to aid me financially so that I could have more money for myself. It would be an understatement to say that she began to shout. Unfortunately, I don't believe I've ever had to listen to such loud noises before. I was lucky not to have my ears bleed when I ended the chat. She referred to me by every possible label throughout her lengthy diatribe, including sexist, manipulative, gaslighting, and financially abusive. I simply needed a break, though. If she couldn't do this for me, why were we even partners? The altercation continued for a while. She probably thought that because I've never been confrontational, I would give in. I didn't, which surprised her. I tried to bring up the subject again after we had been at a standstill for a few more days, but she cut me off once again. I realized we were done at that point. I was only giving her life away and receiving nothing in return. Thus, there was no future for me in this relationship. It was a messy split. Because she was unemployed, she had nowhere to go. I informed her that I was done with her, and that she should have her problems straightened out by then, but I was ready to give her some money to help her get by for a month or two. Let's get the waterworks going. She broke down in tears and accused me of playing the whole theatrical act and bluffing. I informed her that my choice was definite, and that I was no longer interested in this relationship. It could not be saved, and all of the solutions she was now offering ought to have been discussed with her when we were still together rather than as a last resort. The split was nonetheless unpleasant, even though I had set her up for a few months. I didn't understand how much dead weight I had been carrying until she walked away. I could spend so much time and effort on myself. I resumed interests I had given up while in school. These pastimes allowed me to get back in touch with Zara. Zara chose to pursue painting and the arts as a career, despite not attending my college. Even though it was kind of a covert pastime, because it wasn't seen sufficiently manly, I had always loved sketching as a child. I attended since I was curious about the art show in my city. I discovered Zara there. We started chatting after she displayed a work in the show. I had broken up with Ruth a few months before to this. When I asked Zara how things were doing, we struck up a conversation that we both found enjoyable. We agreed to get together once more, and she said she would notify me of any upcoming art events in the area. She did, we reconnected, and we gradually began to fall in love. I was already deeply in love with her when I finally asked her out a year later. When I tried to question Jake about her, he told me that they hadn't spoken since she broke up with the man from his school buddy group. Since it has nothing to do with this narrative, I won't get into the specifics of my connection with Zara. Please know that we have always had a friendly and equal relationship, and that I knew she was the one I wanted to marry from a young age. Ruth made a few attempts to contact me during this period, but I always turned her down. A year into our relationship, Zara was already thinking about getting married, and she was confident enough to avoid bringing her to my family for dinner. Zara was, and always aware of this whenever it happened. That has never been a problem because my parents don't meddle in their children's private matters. Zara and my family got along well, and the supper was enjoyable. We were all discussing how amusing it was that life operates in weird ways and how my run-in with Zara again was entirely coincidental. At that point, Jake joked that he was shocked that his high school infatuation would end up becoming his sister-in-law. At the time, it appeared to be a playful jest. And that's how everyone in the room interpreted it. Zara even claimed that the only person in their group that was even somewhat engaging to converse with was Jake. I didn't give Jake's remark much attention, and the dinner was enjoyable. He also appeared to be really pleased for me. I had no idea that despite having been in several relationships, he had been carrying affections for Zara for all these years. The problems began while the wedding was being planned. At the time, I didn't see it coming since I never imagined my own brother would do anything like this. At first, it was little issues that interfered with the dress appointment time. He may have just been forgetful since he neglected to check in with the caterer. I now see that he purposefully caused a wedge between Zara and me in order to somehow call off the wedding. It didn't work. Even though we were both under a lot of stress, we were too resilient to be shaken by a few missed appointments. If anything, Zara's snippiness and short fuse with Jake simply made him feel worse. The wedding day was the last straw. Ruth and I hadn't communicated all this time. I had no idea what she was doing or where she was, or how she was doing. And to be honest, I didn't care. I had no idea that Jake had been communicating with her for months before the wedding. He was expecting for drama or some sort of intervention, and if that didn't work, he intended to get Ruth to convince or pressure me to leave Zara. She arrived as Jake's +1, even though she wasn't on the guest list. I was taken aback by this, as we expected Jake's girlfriend to be present, and everyone in the family had met her. I felt uneasy, but I didn't have time to ask him why Ruth was there. Fortunately, Ruth had escaped Zara's observation. Ruth got up and began yelling in front of everyone just before Zara was about to go down the aisle. She said that I didn't have to marry Zara and that she was the love of my life, ready to take me back. There was such a ruckus that Ruth began to weep and beat her feet like a spoiled kid. In all honesty, it was pitiful. Taking Jake by the collar, I rushed over to him and yelled at him to get out. He claimed that Ruth and I were destined to be together and that he had come to put things right. And that he was destined to be with Zara. I was horrified by the ridiculous rubbish he continued to spew. I requested that my pals take him and Ruth out of there. Zara came out at this moment, and I'm not even sure if she understood what was going on. But she strolled calmly over to Ruth, blew her a kiss, slapped her in front of everyone, and requested her bridesmaids to start the music. Never in my life have I witnessed anything so legendary. It was really embarrassing for Ruth, and rather of making a big deal out of me, she just made a show of herself in front of everyone. The remainder of the wedding proceeded as well as possible considering the situation. I had not anticipated such a dramatic day, but there was nothing I could do to change the course of events at that point. Immediately following the wedding, I blocked Jake. He had showed me plenty, and I had little interest in hearing his version of events. The fact that Zara and Jake had never really truly bonded made it all the more reprehensible and nasty. To be honest, he was hazardous to be around and possessed delusions. I felt sorry for Violet, his lover. I phoned Violet a few days after the wedding to find out why she didn't go and why Jake didn't invite her as a guest. Before I chose to interfere in their relationship, I needed to know what type of tale he had been telling her. She told me bluntly that I didn't have to act like I liked her, and that she would much prefer I just be honest with her. I quickly realized that Jake had prevented Zara from attending the wedding by using either Zara or me as an excuse. I inquired as to the reason for her statement. Jake had already informed her that she was not welcome, so she instructed me to stop acting. He didn't receive a +1 for the wedding because of this. She said that she didn't mind him leaving, or that we didn't like her, but she was really annoyed that the whole family seemed to like her when we actually didn't like her. I firmly informed her that Jake had deceived her and that none of that was real. Zara and I would meet her when we got back from our honeymoon, and I pleaded with her not to share our talk with Jake or our parents for the next 2 weeks. I had to email her a picture of the real invitation that was sent to Jake, which obviously had an A+1 on it, because she said she wouldn't betray Jake for us. Additionally, I verified her attendance with Jake by sending her screenshots of our chats. She claimed that she didn't trust us, and I told her that I understood and that we weren't requesting her trust, but rather that she hold off until we could meet and address the misunderstanding. She consented, but I wasn't sure if she would follow through on it. As I enjoyed my honeymoon, I could only pray that nothing would go wrong. However, I was eager to expose Violet Jake's true nature. Update 1: I had no idea this story would become so well known. As I mentioned, I went gone on my honeymoon and didn't care to check Reddit, but my email is overflowing with requests for updates. Thankfully, nothing unpleasant occurred during the actual honeymoon. Jake didn't attempt to phone me, and he was still blocked. Violet texted me briefly to say that she wanted to meet as soon as I got back from my honeymoon but hadn't discussed our chat with Jake. A few hours had passed since the meeting. Violet didn't feel safe visiting our house, so we met at a cafe. At first she was really protective, and it was obvious from her demeanor and body language that she didn't want to hear what we had to say. However, we thoroughly explained what had transpired to her. She first didn't believe us and called us insane for making such a false accusation on Jake. I did, however, ask some acquaintances if they had any wedding films while we were on our vacation. A few individuals were filming, so we were able to piece the incident together in rough form even though there wasn't a single video that recorded the full experience. After showing Violet the films, I went over the entire Ruth scenario with her. At that point, she began to trust us. When she inquired about any past interactions between her and Jake, Zara adamantly denied it. It was difficult for Violet to accept that Jake would be so naive about everything, particularly if nothing was happening. Zara claimed to be equally perplexed. She didn't know how or when Jake fell in love with her, and she thought that she had fallen for him. They had only had 10 or 12 in-person encounters. We informed Violet that we believed it was our responsibility to notify her of the situation and that she might use the knowledge any way she saw fit. Additionally, we informed her that we had blocked Jake and would not be communicating with him moving forward, and we didn't see this changing in the near future. She acknowledged our point of view, but she also stated that she wanted to speak with Jake and do it right now. She said she owed it to herself, especially since she was pregnant, despite our best efforts to talk her out of it, to determine if staying with Jake was a good idea. Zara and I both congratulated her on her pregnancy and assured her that we would always be there for her. She stated that although she was certain she wanted to continue the confrontation, she would have to reveal that we had contacted her and told her everything. Zara and I understood that supporting Violet was the correct thing to do, even if it wasn't ideal, because we both wanted to avoid becoming involved in the Jake drama. We assured her that we would do all in our power to support her. I am aware that this is not the end, but that was the only thing that transpired during the meeting. Jake's situation is about to explode up, and he has no idea what's going to happen. Update 2: I am aware that this update will be released shortly, but the situation has gotten out of hand. Jake is going to take a serious hit, and I don't regret accidentally starting a storm. Violet wasted no time in getting right to the point after speaking with us. She asked Jake if he was at work when she phoned him. She stormed over to his office that precise moment and confronted him after he said yes. It became nasty. She entered his office right away. She inquired whether he had done the things we had warned her about, and said she was dropping off some papers for him, so they let her in. Jake attempted to reassure her that they would discuss when he got home and that it wasn't the right place to do so. Violet, however, would have none of it. HR had to be summoned up to his floor because there was a good deal of shouting going on. For Jake, this is when things either become better or worse. When the HR assistant questioned Violet about her identity and the reason behind the commotion, Violet revealed that she was pregnant and Jake's girlfriend. She was shocked when Jake denied it. He categorically denied dating her. More shouting followed, and Violet was finally led away. That day, a storm awaited Jake as he returned home. I don't know the specifics, but they got into a huge fight. I do know that it was discovered that Jake had been having an affair with Violet for a considerable amount of time, and that the lady he was having an affair with was the HR assistant who had stepped in to break the news. Jake is therefore doomed. Violet is a no-nonsense lady who doesn't put up with disrespect, therefore I'm certain that she will leave him. It is nearly difficult for her to forgive Jake and condone infidelity. There is a very rigorous no-dating regulation at Jake's workplace about his affair partner. Employees are forced to sign contracts and other documents. His affair partner, let's call her Jane, found out that Jake had been pretending to be a single guy and that he had a pregnant girlfriend after the altercation and violent outburst at work. When Jane discovered that Jake had been lying to her the entire time and that she was the other lady, she was horrified. Word spread quickly, and Jake is already facing criticism at work for his actions. Jane has ties to the company's executives, which exacerbates his situation. Jake is therefore in a lot of trouble. He will undoubtedly lose Violet, and he may lose his job. Oh, and he was expelled from the house by Violet as well. Jake had nowhere to go because it turns out that Violet's grandma owned the house where they resided. In the middle of the night, Jake came to see us and gave me an explanation of everything. For some reason, I allowed him in. Never in my life have I witnessed him so enraged. He was yelling at me about how I had destroyed his life, and how Zara would eventually leave me for him, and how I never deserved someone like her. I was genuinely concerned for his mental health, because of how insane he sounded. He needed the assistance of a therapist or maybe a psychiatrist. Jake also became aggressive with me. I'm aware that I'll be called a fool for not calling the police on him, but ultimately he's my brother, and I didn't want to add to his troubles. More than anything, I felt sorry for him. It's incomprehensible how one foolish choice can ruin someone's life. He had everything that a person could desire. He had a wonderful profession, a devoted and caring fiancé, and a kid on the way. But he blew it all away with a series of foolish choices while living in his own bizarre fantasy world. Right now, I simply feel bad for him. In the third update, Jake was laid off. Even while this is not shocking, I still feel horrible. Violet no longer wants to be associated with him after their breakup. Violet has the full support of Zara, me, and my parents. Jake now believes that because of an innocent joke, I've alienated the entire family. Yes, he is now claiming that his pledge of unwavering love was a hoax. He has been totally shunned by the family, and no one is believing this new story of his. This drama has been annoying me, and I'm not sure where he's residing at the moment. I know I started this by engaging Violet in the first place, and I'm pleased I did, but I never imagined it would become this bad. I'm a newlywed and I can't keep rushing around dealing with the mess Jake has caused. I don't see how Jake can get over this. It's a complete disaster. I don't blame my parents for being upset with him since he threw everything away and was essentially a jerk. I don't know how he came to be this way. We weren't brought up this way. This will be my final update though. Zara and I have come to the conclusion that we must move on from this. Violet will always have a home with us, and we will support her and our niece or nephew in any manner she requires. But that's about it. I appreciate all of the advice, Reddit. I never imagined that I would have my own dysfunctional narrative to tell, but that is what it is.